to you about the project and how each of you got involved?
Well, I read Odysseus' great book, and straight away it sort of. Sorry, I'm just a little bit in shock.
So fair, so fair.
I've never seen the movie on such a big screen.
It's huge.
It was. I'm just so proud of these guys.
Yeah.
Really, I think. Congratulations. Also, we have some other people in the audience here who made the film. If you made the film, will you stand up and maybe people can give you a round of applause? There's Olga, and Luke, Jeannie, Anthony, everyone else. Yes, so I read the book, and I thought it was a great book, and we spoke on Zoom, didn't we, at the beginning of like 2020 or something, and you've been thinking about making it as a film for a little while, and I just thought that these characters were great. I thought that the tone was exactly the sort of thing that I love, these sort of dark, strangely funny, weird stories, and so, then we set about trying to adapt it. I mean, maybe you want to say a bit about how that went?
So we talked, and we agreed on some really crucial things. We agreed that we were making a movie that wasn't going to pretend like it wasn't a movie. And I'm just kind of remembering that now, that sort of oath that we knew what we were getting into after watching it. I'm also kind of reeling. We shared a vision, and then Luke and I went and wrote a script, and we got so lucky.
Yeah.
And that's how it happened.
And tell me, Thomasin and Marin, these performances are incredible. But first, what spoke to you about the material, and what sort of sparked your interest in participating?
I think I was already a fan of Odysseus because I'd read her book, My Year of Rest and Relaxation,
Fabulous.
which I loved. And then the script came through, and I immediately read Eileen, which I also love, and I'm currently reading another one of Odysseus' books, Just in Her Hands, which I'm also loving, so big fan. So that was like the first pull, and I watched Lady Macbeth by Will, and I was like, oh my god, this guy is very talented, very addictive. Will and I also talked on Zoom, all happening during the pandemic, and then I auditioned in my grandma's old fur coat, because I just felt like it, I don't know, it made sense, and then obviously it did make sense because it ended up in the film, and yeah, it kind of went from there.
Anybody else blown away by how Thomasin actually talks?
I'm really honored to be in this cast. I just wanted to begin by saying that I'm really proud to be in this movie, and thank you, everyone, very, very much. I wanted to work with Will after I saw Lady Macbeth. I thought it was extraordinary work in which I saw sometimes you say words and you don't know if you're going to regret it afterwards, so if this has turned into an annoying headline, I'm really sorry. I saw a study of female complication that hit me really, really deep. And I felt like Will was a filmmaker that could be trusted to tell complicated stories, especially about females. And that meant a great deal to me because I just remembered one of the very first questions I ever got asked when I started acting, which meant, and had to do press, was, are you a good girl or a bad girl? I was 16. And my 16-year-old self wanted to respond with this film. And so though I did not know that when I read the script, I think part of me hoped for this exact moment.
Yeah, wow.
I was a huge fan of every single person standing in. I was scared to death about this. When I read the book, when I got to Mrs. Polk's thing, I had to take a break. From reading the book, I was like, yeah, no, just take a time out. So when this came my way, I was like, that part? Was not sure that was a good idea for my mental health. And then I talked to Will, and I had seen his work, and I was a huge fan of Otessa's, and it felt honestly like I could not try, but I didn't really know what would happen to me. And we rehearsed a little bit and all of that, so it ended up being one of the most beautiful experiences I ever had. But honestly, I couldn't say no. It was too scary. I couldn't say no.
Absolutely. Well, it's incredible material, obviously. You've really done a lot with it, yeah.
Just to reiterate what everyone's been saying, it's Will, it's Otessa's novel, and this too. I mean, I was, you're looking for a challenge. You're looking for something that scares you, and you don't know when you first read it how are you going to pull it off. And so, I love these women. I'm in awe at what I just saw, and I've seen it twice. It's rich and it's everything you want in a film, but I think these women should be applauded for what I saw.
Anyone in the audience have some questions for the team up here? Or you just got it?
I have a question. Does anyone have any water? I'm really thirsty.
I bet we could get some water out here. Yes.
Great. It's quite
Great
thirsty
question.
in Park City,
Great
right?
question. Yeah.
You're constantly parched.
Anyone, don't be shy unless you're shy. Yeah, right here. Yep. Question is, what's the best advice you got when you started out in the film industry?
We didn't get any advice when we started out in the film industry. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, obviously, we had a lot of guides, but I think that taking risks, going for what's scary. I think this film is, watching it alone or watching it with my screenwriting partner, is very different than watching it with 1,200 people.
Yes.
I'm shocked. I'm processing it, but like leaning into the trauma that is shared, that is generational, and the loneliness and the struggles in terms of, wellness, mental health, loneliness, pain, generations, like I said, of trauma and abuse, I think are things that we have to look at. So leaning into the films that scare us, I think is something that we believe in and we all share a common mind. And everyone here on stage obviously felt compelled. So that would be the advice, I think, to go for what's scary and what's meaningful.
Beautifully said. Very Sundance sort of principle. Yes, risk takers. Yeah, standing up. Questions for Otessa. Your writing is very cinematic. Do you see yourself as a director in the future?
Yes.
You heard it here first. Anyone else? Yeah, right here.
Where are you? I can't see you. There, hello. It's a relief to be able to work with accents because I love my accent. I'm a very, very proud New Zealander, but I found it pretty distracting myself, and when I listen back and I'm like, oh, God, it sounds like that. Okay. So it helps me to kind of, obviously it helps me to get into the character when I have like really exciting accents to work with like Boston accents, or I've done Cornish and American and RP. I don't know, it's such a fun challenge. It kind of helps me to move past feeling quite so self-conscious of myself and to kind of focus in more on the character. And I love accents because usually when I'm filming I just use the accent the entire time throughout the shoot. So it kind of helps to really become invested in the world that we're living in. And it's also really fun at the end of a job when I finally break out my Kiwi accent and the crew are like, what is this?
Yeah, great question. Got another? Right there. Yeah, the question's about the preparation process and how you rehearsed.
Well, we were lucky we had some rehearsal, not always the case.
Yeah.
I think it's important because even if you do nothing else, it's great to just work out what each thought means. Because I think, for me, especially with these guys, what I'm watching on screen is, sorry, I'll put my back to you, sorry, is a sort of, is the thought process in action, if you like, especially when we've been asked this question actually a lot about when there's a first-person narrative, Eileen's point of view in the book, how do we get that across without using voiceover? And I think that what Thomasin is able to do, the transmission of thought, is so clear for me that can only come about if the thoughts are clear in the first place. Otherwise, what you end up is with this generalized emotion, which is what we don't want, obviously, Not that you ever did that, but... So I think that, for me, with the rehearsal process, was about establishing what each of those thoughts were. And I think we spent some good time doing that. And it was very enjoyable. It was a great opportunity to get to know each other in that time. And then we did have a couple of days. I mean, I remember very clearly one day when we went to the basement together, and just sort of sat in there and worked out what we were going to be doing. That was pretty chilly day, wasn't it? Quite cold, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about anything, the rehearsal that you found?
I want to say what you were saying, the clarity of thought, like figuring out what each thought is. One of my favorite parts about working with Will, and something I'd never experienced before, is that for every single scene we would do a silent take. So one of the actors would be allowed to say their lines, but the other one would just have to, shut up basically, and just kind of, I don't know, react. And it was really, really difficult and really vulnerable, but it really clarified a lot of things for me. So yeah, I just want to say that was really fun, a really fun time to film. Okay, sounds like a bit of a time waster. And it didn't end up being a time waster because he used a lot of that.
Well, and sometimes it would reveal something to you, right? Because then we sometimes do another take after the silent take, where then you're like, oh, that's clarified something. Let me try this way. It's sort of, you get stuck in take after take after take. It sort of wipes it clean for a minute. And I also feel like, when you know what the lines are, you've done them so many times, and then you do a silent take, all of those thoughts are in there, and they really come through. I can see it in your face. It's amazing on the screen. It's very clear for me that there is so much that you're processing. You can see it in operation. It's amazing. It's really great.
Crystal clear. Definitely comes across. Probably have time for one last question.
Yeah, I just want to add.
Okay.
I'll just jump on it.
Yes, clearly.
You did a beautiful job telling the story visually. I'm here.
I see you.
Without words in so many places that made everything absolutely crystal clear. It sort of plays into what you guys were just talking about. And my question is, there were a number of shots, one in the Pope's house and also in the other home, where you allowed the camera to stay in the actors and intervene in the frame, and sometimes there were no actors in the frame. And you got a real sense of the atmosphere.
generally about framing. I can't summarize the whole thing.
This is an excellent question. Yes, it's a great question. Yeah, and the truth is, actually, it's an interesting point you make, because the whole of the movie is told through Eileen's point of view, apart from that moment when we leave her and we are with Rebecca. That's really the only moment we're with Rebecca in the whole film. The only moment we're outside of Eileen's point of view. And we did that to try and create a sense of, for it to feel unsettling. Absolutely, it was intentional, yeah. I'll tell the editor as well, Nick Emerson, who I actually have to just say, three people, I mean, there's a lot of people I wish were here, but like three in particular, Nick Emerson, editor, I mean, I really think he's done a fantastic job with this movie. Richard Reed Parry, who wrote the score, I think, is incredible, and really my right hand, Ari Wegner, who just shot it so incredibly fantastic.
Well, thank you all so much for being here and chatting about the film, and thank you for sharing the work with us so we could share with our audiences first. It's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the festival.